Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, gather in close and listen with an open heart today when someone approaches life with a sense of genuine curiosity. It's as though they carry an invisible spark that catches the attention of everyone around them. They don't move through their days looking to simply confirm what they already know or to stick to safe, familiar paths. Instead, they lean into the unknown with a kind of wonder that feels alive and contagious. This openness to explore new ideas, new perspectives, and new people is magnetic because it signals that they haven't closed themselves off to possibility. It tells others that they see the world as larger and more complex than their own experience, and that they're brave enough to admit they don't have all the answers. Curiosity draws people in because it reflects a humility that is deeply engaging. Fascinating people are rarely preoccupied with appearing as the most knowledgeable or most accomplished in the room. They'd much rather ask a thoughtful question or encourage someone else to share their thoughts than jump in with a rehearsed opinion. In doing so, they make everyone around them feel as though their insights matter and deserve to be heard. This kind of attention is a gift in a culture that often celebrates those who speak the loudest, rather than those who listen the most. And when someone feels genuinely heard, they naturally want to spend more time with the person who created that feeling. A truly curious person is also willing to embrace discomfort for the sake of discovery. Instead of turning away from what they don't understand, they lean into those areas with patience and interest. They read books outside their usual genres, they travel to places that challenge their assumptions, and they spend time with people who hold beliefs that might at first seem unfamiliar. This willingness to stretch beyond the comfortable is what keeps their inner world expanding, and that depth shows in the way they speak and move and relate to others. You can sense that they carry a rich, layered inner landscape, one that's been shaped by a lifelong habit of seeking out what's new and meaningful. That is part of what makes them so fascinating. They see conversations as an opportunity to discover something surprising rather than a chance to prove themselves. Instead of feeling threatened by someone who knows more than they do, they feel energized. They have learned to appreciate the brilliance in other people's stories and expertise because they recognize that every person has something to teach them. This absence of ego and agenda allows them to connect on a deeper level, creating an atmosphere of mutual respect and shared exploration. And as this habit of curiosity takes root, it influences how they navigate their own goals as well. Curiosity reminds them that they don't need to have every step mapped out perfectly before they begin. They understand that growth often happens in the spaces where they dare to ask what if or why not, and that the most valuable lessons emerge when they give themselves permission to take a leap without a guarantee of the outcome. That's what allows them to live more creatively and to discover paths they never would have noticed had they kept their focus too narrow. Curiosity also keeps them engaged with life even during times of challenge. When circumstances become difficult or unpredictable, they don't rush to label those moments as purely negative. Instead, they look closer, wondering what might be learned, what might shift, and what new strength might emerge as they navigate unfamiliar territory. This habit of approaching obstacles with questions instead of resistance softens the edges of fear and opens up the possibility of transforming hardship into growth. And perhaps most of all, curiosity is endlessly renewing. A curious person rarely stagnates because they're not interested in maintaining a perfect image or a fixed identity. They allow themselves to evolve with each new conversation, each new insight, each new day. That flexibility of mind and spirit is fascinating because it feels real. It reminds everyone they encounter that life is not a straight line, but an unfolding journey filled with mysteries waiting to be uncovered. This spirit of wonder not only enriches their own life, but also gives everyone around them permission to embrace the same sense of discovery. When someone truly listens to you with their full attention, it feels different. It feels as though, for those few minutes, you matter in a way that is both grounding and uplifting. Fascinating people understand this intuitively. They don't listen with a list of clever replies already forming in their mind or wait for a convenient gap so they can jump in with their own story. Instead, they listen to understand, to truly grasp the essence of what someone is sharing without agenda or interruption. And because of that, they draw others toward them in a way that is natural and genuine. That kind of listening is surprisingly rare in a world where distractions crowd every moment, and most conversations feel rushed. When someone slows down enough to simply be present with you, without glancing at their phone or seeming impatient, it signals that they respect you enough to give you their time and attention. This is powerful because it makes you feel acknowledged and seen. In that moment, the listener isn't thinking about how they can sound interesting. They're focused on the speaker's experience, thoughts, and emotions. That's magnetic because it allows the speaker to relax into the conversation, knowing they're safe to speak honestly. And there is an art to this kind of deep listening. It's more than being quiet while someone else talks. It's picking up on tone and pacing, hearing the subtle messages carried between the words, noticing the slight hesitations and changes in expression that reveal what matters most to them. Fascinating people have developed this sensitivity, and they use it to draw out richer, more authentic conversations. They lean in gently with questions that show they are engaged, not prying, not forcing, but encouraging further exploration of whatever is on the speaker's heart. This skill turns every encounter into an opportunity for real connection rather than shallow exchange. And this way of listening doesn't come from a place of passivity. It takes discipline to silence the ego's urge to jump in and relate everything back to oneself. Fascinating people recognize that they don't need to prove their worth by dominating the discussion or showcasing their intellect. They trust that by holding space for someone else, they're creating a deeper and more memorable interaction than they ever could by simply trying to impress. That inner confidence is palpable. It allows them to hold a steady presence even in difficult or emotional conversations without feeling the need to steer the moment back to themselves. When someone experiences this kind of presence, they often walk away from the conversation feeling lighter. They may not even consciously register why, but they will know they felt heard. That feeling lingers long after the words have been exchanged, making the listener someone who is thought of warmly and appreciatively. And as this practice is repeated across many interactions, at work, at home, in fleeting conversations with strangers, it shapes a reputation of being someone who is genuinely interested in people, someone who invites honesty and ease. That is what makes this kind of listening so fascinating. It's not built on flashy stories or clever one-liners. It's built on respect, compassion, and a quiet trust that everyone they encounter has something valuable to share. This trust in others' humanity changes the way they navigate the world. It means they never assume they already know what someone will say or how they will feel. Instead, they leave room for surprises, for new depths of understanding, and that openness infuses their conversations with vitality. And this deep listening also nurtures their own inner world. By making space for other people's experiences, they gain insight into different ways of thinking and being, allowing them to grow in empathy and perspective. They come to appreciate the richness of human stories and realize that no matter how well they think they understand someone, there is always more to discover if they are patient enough to listen. That insight feeds their curiosity and fuels the sense of wonder that they carry into every future interaction. This habit of listening to understand also reveals a powerful humility. They appreciate that there is always more to learn, always another layer to explore in even the most familiar relationships. That humility frees them from the need to control or direct every conversation, allowing them to simply be present. And that presence, grounded in a sincere desire to hear others as they truly are, is what keeps people coming back to them, knowing that they will be met not with judgment or advice, but with real attention and respect. When someone moves through life with a clear sense of what truly matters to them, there is a quiet gravity about them that is impossible to ignore. Fascinating people often possess this deep inner knowing that anchors their choices and shapes the way they carry themselves. It's not loud or boastful. Instead, it's steady, like a lighthouse that doesn't need to shout for attention because its light is felt simply by its presence. They understand that purpose is not something handed to them. It is something uncovered by paying attention to their passions, their values, and the impact they want to have in the world. This kind of self-awareness shapes their words and actions in subtle but profound ways. When someone is guided by a clear sense of purpose, every small decision feels connected to a larger intention. They are not tossed back and forth by the trends and expectations of others, nor do they chase fleeting distractions just to fill their time. Instead, they tend to gravitate toward experiences and people that align with their deeper priorities. That sense of alignment radiates outward, creating a feeling of congruence that others can sense. It's why spending time with someone like this often feels so refreshing. They are wholly themselves, and that kind of congruence is rare. This inner purpose also brings them a particular kind of focus that is deeply appealing. Because they are clear on what matters most, they can say no to what doesn't. They don't scatter their energy across a dozen meaningless directions just to stay busy. They choose their commitments carefully, investing fully where they feel they can make a genuine difference or grow in a meaningful way. That discernment comes across as grounded and deliberate, qualities that leave a strong impression because they reflect a life that is being thoughtfully led rather than passively followed. And it's this clarity that allows them to speak and act with a kind of authenticity that draws people in. They don't feel the need to pretend to be someone they're not because they already understand who they are becoming. Even when they're uncertain about what the next chapter holds, they're guided by a deeper sense of trust in their own path. That trust shows up in their presence. They seem comfortable in their own skin, able to stand firm in their beliefs without becoming rigid or dismissive. Others can feel that strength, and it reassures them, making them want to lean in and listen. Purpose also shapes the way they navigate their relationships. Rather than approaching people transactionally, they look for genuine connections that reflect their values. Whether they are in a work setting or spending time with loved ones, they show up with a sense of intention. They want to contribute something real to the conversation, to leave someone feeling a bit more encouraged, a bit more seen. That kind of presence is magnetic because it reminds people what it feels like to be taken seriously and treated as someone who matters. And as they grow deeper into their purpose, they become more comfortable with growth itself. even when it's messy or challenging. They recognize that growth is rarely straightforward and that real learning often requires discomfort. This allows them to embrace new experiences with a kind of quiet courage, not because they are certain they will succeed, but because they believe the effort is worthwhile. That kind of integrity is fascinating to witness because it is not driven by a fear of failure or a desire for recognition. It is driven by a commitment to becoming more fully who they already sense they could be. That commitment is visible even in the way they handle obstacles. Instead of avoiding difficulty or denying their fears, they acknowledge what they feel and keep moving anyway. They don't pretend that the path is easy, and they don't need to project an image of perfection to feel valuable. What they do project is a calm resilience, an understanding that the most meaningful pursuits require patience and steady effort. And as they lean into that process, they inspire others simply by showing what it looks like to live in alignment with a deeper sense of purpose, a life that feels more substantial, more intentional, and ultimately more fascinating in its honesty and depth. When someone dares to embrace their own vulnerability, it changes the way they move through the world. It's not an easy path, because showing one's true self, fears, hopes, struggles, and all, means stepping into a space where there are no guarantees, only the possibility of being fully seen. Fascinating people often have this kind of openness because they recognize that vulnerability is not weakness, it's a profound expression of strength. Instead of hiding behind a carefully constructed image or presenting only their most polished version, they allow themselves to be real, even when that means feeling exposed. That authenticity resonates deeply with those around them, making them someone others feel they can truly trust. That honesty begins with being honest with themselves. They take the time to look inward, to acknowledge the parts of their experience they'd sometimes rather hide, the uncertainties that keep them up at night, the mistakes they wish they could undo, the emotions they don't fully understand. By choosing to meet themselves in these raw places without judgment, they cultivate a self-compassion that naturally extends to others. And that gentleness is palpable. People sense they're in the presence of someone who accepts humanity in its fullness, not just the easy, pleasant parts. That is immensely attractive because it signals that they will hold others' vulnerable moments with respect and care. And so, these people tend to move through relationships with a quiet openness. They don't need to put up walls or masks, so they don't demand those walls of others. Instead, they create space for real conversations, real connections. They invite honesty simply by showing up without pretense. This doesn't mean they bear every detail of their lives to everyone they meet. It means they don't pretend to be someone they're not. They recognize that true belonging happens when both people feel safe enough to show up as they are, knowing they won't be judged for their imperfections. That kind of freedom is rare, and it feels incredibly magnetic to experience. Vulnerability also requires the courage to take risks emotionally. It asks someone to speak honestly, even when they're scared of how their words might land. That might mean telling someone they matter to you without knowing if they feel the same, or owning up to an error before someone else points it out, or admitting that you don't have all the answers in a room full of people who seem so sure. Fascinating people do these things not because they enjoy discomfort, but because they know that this is what real integrity looks like. They understand that connection can't grow in the soil of perfection. It needs the rich, messy soil of honesty. And what's remarkable is that this kind of openness rarely goes unnoticed. Even people who seem guarded themselves can't help but respond on some level when they encounter someone who is willing to show up as they truly are. Vulnerability has a quiet power. It signals that someone has done the difficult inner work of making peace with their whole story. That inner work shines through in their voice, in their presence, in the way they relate to others. They offer others permission to do the same, to lower the protective masks they wear and explore what it feels like to be seen without the need to perform. That is a gift, one that most people don't even realize they're craving until they experience it. And as they practice this openness, they also grow increasingly comfortable with imperfection. They stop seeing flaws as shameful and start seeing them as part of what shapes character and depth. This allows them to live with a greater sense of ease, because they're not spending energy trying to seem flawless. It also allows them to appreciate those quirks and cracks in others, creating connections that feel less transactional and more heartfelt. In a world so often focused on image and surface, someone who lives and loves without that armor is truly unforgettable.